Welcome to our presentation. We have asked that everyone who's received a congressional discretionary earmark attend the session just to make sure everybody understands the parameters and processes we all have to live by. We have been working with the governor's office new federal affairs team to try to get more aligned within New Jersey on congressional earmarks. I'm sure many of you know that DOT, the MPOs do not typically tend to be part of the process. We are asked to provide support letters for these type of things to the congressional offices. And we're trying to get some of the best projects for New Jersey, not that we're making a determination on whether the type of project it is a good project. What we're trying to do at DOT is to ensure it's a project that can be delivered. So we want to make sure New Jersey is successful in any funding that it goes after. And so we're trying to help the governor's office and the congressional offices align the submissions so we know it's a project that can be delivered through the federal process. So we're just going to walk you through a quick agenda, try to hit the highlights of what you need to know, and then we'll talk about what the next steps are. So again, we want to make sure these are successful projects. So if you work with us, if you listen to what we say, if you're not familiar with federal processes, this is federal funding. We do not set any of the requirements for federal funding. They're set at the federal level. It's our job to make sure that all the processes and standards are met. That's what our job is. And so we want to help you get this across the finish line. This is how I like to describe it. The federal process is like a good book. You cannot read the last page first. You cannot apply for a congressional discretionary earmark for construction funding if you have not followed any of the earlier federal processes. So what does that mean? I'm going to hand it off to Veronica to walk you through those processes.
Every federally funded project that comes through NJDOT must follow NJDOT's project delivery process. What does that mean? It means you must start at concept development, follow through to the other phases, preliminary engineering, final design, and then construction. Everybody wants to get to the design phase and the construction phase, yes, but we have to step back a little bit and do something before that. So we're going to focus a little bit on the concept development phase because from our experience with these congressional earmark projects, we have realized that this is the phase that most grant recipients are not familiar with. Right. So to us and to the feds, it's the planning phase. So you must understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve before you put pencils on paper and start designing stuff. So everybody who comes to the process with a design before you have done certain things like figured out what your purpose and need is, right? Developed a couple alternatives, one of which could be a no-build alternative, and then select the right solution from those alternatives, then you have not followed the federal process, right? So as Lane said, there are steps that we must go through, tasks that we must accomplish. And, you know, once you understand what those steps are, it's not that painful, right? And that's what we're here for. And my team and I are here and ready to guide you through that concept development phase. Once you're done with that, then you're on your way to design in some way, shape, or form. Now, some projects will require that you do concept development, preliminary engineering, and the final design stage before you get to construction. But as we meet with you and understand your project, we could realize that your project might not meet a full scope criteria. So there's another path for you. So if we determine that your project is not a full scope project, then probably will fit into the limited scope budget, right? What does that mean? It means still have to do concept development, but you skip preliminary engineering and advance the final design and construction. So you get to construction faster, but you must still do concept development. And landing in a limited scope path means that your project will avoid certain things, right? Like significant right of way, significant environmental impacts, or any other impact. That is the project that you can get to design faster with limited impact, but still can't get there without doing concept development.
So I would just add to that, Veronica, that in the limited scope phase, if you have done some work, that's not going to preclude you from getting the federal funds, but you may have to go back and do some things that are missing. For example, if you did not have any public outreach, you have to do that. So don't lose hope yet, right? We're going to try to work and see what we can do, but you may have to go backwards to go forwards.
Right, right. And we can talk about that a little bit more too when we talk about, the readiness of your project. Yes. All right. So just like how you got to keep CD in your brain, the obligation date is the other thing you got to keep in your brain, right? After the grant has been awarded, you have 3 years to draw down that money. And if you're lucky, you can dip into it maybe twice, but more than likely, it'd probably be only a one-time going to the well once to retrieving those funds. If you miss that obligation date, and it's officially the end of September, correct, Lane, of that year? But to make sure, we're like putting you on notice that your ducks better be in a row from June, okay? So
Right.
that we can get there.
So while it's the end of September, the federal books literally close, and we do not know what the date in September the books close. So June, July, make sure everything's in order. Worst case scenario, we're into August, but once you hit September, you may not get your project authorized.
My staff will be giving you deadlines from like June, July, okay? There's a method to that madness, right? The ultimate goal is to make sure that you can receive these funds to do what you asked for originally.
We want to reiterate, so when you do any work with the DOT, nothing happens until there's an agreement in place, right? There's no authority to do anything until we have a binding agreement that is going to provide you access to the funds. It has a scope of work. Everybody understands what the parameters are. You'll work through with Veronica's staff what the eligible expenses are. You'll have to submit invoices with documentation. And the important point here is federal funds are reimbursement only, right? You cannot get anything issued up front. You have to invoice and then get repaid. If you have a cash flow problem, I suggest you contact the iBank. So the iBank has worked with a couple federal recipients. They can provide you the funding up front, and then you pay them back over time, and you can pay them back as you get reimbursed through the DOT for the invoices that you submit. So if it's a cash flow problem, I do suggest you reach out to them, or because these are congressional discretionary, I believe 99.99999% of them do not have the complete funding required to do the projects. So if you are seeking additional funding, I would also recommend you reach out to the iBank. Many people say, well, we'll just bond for anything that's beyond that. So just in case you're not aware, the iBank does get funding through the TTF, and those are free dollars to the iBank. So they're able to offer a lower rate than any individual municipality or county can do, because they typically do something like half of the AAA bond rate. So Just a suggestion, if you have a cash flow problem or you do not have full funding for your project. Again, the federal standards, we just put a couple up just to give you an idea, and we can work through all of these. Everything that's done federally requires NEPA, so you have to have a federally approved environmental process, and that's where the outreach comes into play, that you have to document and have all that information lined up. We'll talk to you about consultant procurement. If you're using the funds to hire a consultant, you must do it according to the federal requirements. If you have your own consultant already on the book, you're not going to use the grant to pay for, that's fine, but your consultant must follow every federal process. Civil rights requirements. So I'm sure you're aware there's been changes at the federal level. The programs have to be reevaluated and meet the current requirements, and DOT is working through that process, and we have to do it in conjunction with a couple other agencies. So until you're given additional information, just for right now, and clearly this should be different 3 years from now, but for right now, there's 0 requirements for civil rights. That will change as soon as the process works its way through. Again, ADA is required for everything. You have to know about Buy America. Veronica, you want to talk about how you're going to assess what they're ready for?
Yes, yes. This is the fun part. This is where my team and I get to talk to you and ask you a million questions. So as Lane said earlier, what we're really going to do is to sit down with you. You tell us the problem you're trying to solve. Where is that location? And one of the things, probably one of the first questions we'll ask you is, have you done any work towards solving this problem? Because that's important. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to throw out everything that you've done already, but we're going to have to take a look at what you've done. We're going to have to ask questions. How did you get from point A to point B? If it's right of way, did you follow our federal right of way acquisition process and standards? All of those questions need to be answered, and answered truthfully, and answered in a timely manner, because we don't want any surprises 6 months into this where we'll have to tell you, sorry, you did something that we can't backtrack on, and therefore you can't use these funds anymore. This is going to be a conversation that we'll have together. And the intent is to make sure that we get you on the path that you need to be on. We need to understand if it's a limited scope or a full scope, and figure out how long it will take you to get you where you need to go. Previous rounds, we've spent a lot of time discussing project scope. So moving forward, we have learned a few things, and so we're going to change things up a little bit. One of the first things we're going to do is not to spend 3 meetings discussing with you what you think your scope is, right? We're going to schedule a field trip, and you're going to go out with my team, and you're going to point and show and tell, okay? That's the best way for us to be able to guide you. So yes, it might seem a little painful with all the questions we had to ask, but we're also there for you to ask questions, all right? Anything you're not sure about, ask us. So that whole readiness experience and conversation leads us to telling you that you have a project that can meet limited scope, or you can meet full scope. You will have to tell us how you really want to use your funds. Do you want to use it to procure a consultant to do your CD, or you want to use your in-house funds and then save your funds for construction? Understanding that there are consequences to all of these decisions, and everything goes back to that clock, the obligation date, all right? So gotta make all the points connect to get you to that point. A realistic schedule. Every day spent trying to make a decision is a day wasted, okay? And the clock is still ticking, all right? So I would say after this meeting, you should all go back to your offices and gather any information that you have and get yourself ready for this conversation. Like we said, if you have done anything, pull all of those information together so that you will be able to share and answer the questions that we have. And my team is excited and ready to work with you on these projects. Next. Oh, I think next is Vanessa.
Okay, great. Thanks, Veronica. I just want to take a minute to introduce myself so you can put a face with a name and get some understanding of how the MPOs are involved in this process. So I work for NJTPA. So if you're the recipient of a congressionally directed spending grant within our 13 county region, which is from Sussex down to Ocean County, you'll want to reach out to me and my group. This same process will be followed by the other two MPOs. So you'll want to reach out to Alice Gibson if you're in the SJTPO region, or Rick Murphy for DVRPC, or you can just reach out to me again and I can point you in their direction. So to start, in order to authorize funding on your project within that 3-year timeline that Veronica and Lane were discussing and utilize the money that's been awarded to you, you'll need to get it programmed first on the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. So there's some basic information about your project that we'll need to assign it a unique number, or DB num as we call it. So to get to this step, there's a few things we need to check first. So is it already a part of the appendix of NJTPA's TIP? So if your project is already listed in our TIP appendix, and you can click on the link in the presentation to look, or just reach out to us directly, we can obtain your DB num and process your request relatively quickly. The hurdle becomes if we're not aware of your awarded project and it hasn't been included in our appendix. If that's the case, your project is considered new, and that means it has to jump through all the hoops of being introduced and voted on at one of our board meetings as an amendment. So since we typically only have 6 board meetings a year, that creates sometimes months of waiting to prepare the board documents, present it for vote at the meeting, and then wait for the required governor's veto period to expire. So the best thing you can do from all of this is just to start the conversation early. Reach out when your project has been awarded and just start talking to me or the other MPOs and just get that conversation going. At that point, we can provide you with a form with all the required information that we will need. That includes description of project, phases to program, and dollar amounts to fully fund the project. So please include any non-federal dollars or other money you're using towards the project to show it fully funded, as well as with the congressionally directed spending grant money as well. And then there's some other basic information that we'll want from you as well, so that we can start the process of getting your project programmed on the TIP and in eSTEP. Thank you for your time, and feel free to reach out to me at any point if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
So clearly not all the projects are in NJTPA's area, but we wanted to have Vanessa kind of provide an overview of what you would have to do with each of your MPOs. So clearly, if you're in SJTPA's region, you reach out to them. If you're in DVRPC's region, you reach out to them. And I want to just reiterate the point that Vanessa made, that when you actually have to show the project on the TIP, you have to show all funding. So that tends to be a hurdle for many people to line that up. So you will have to provide that information in order to get on the TIP. So just a heads up on that. So maybe you've gotten an earmark from somewhere else that did not go through DOT and FHWA. Maybe you got an earmark through HUD or some other agency, and you said, I didn't have to do any of that for my other earmark. Well, you're correct, you didn't. FHWA has very stringent requirements that we all have to meet. And local aid, by our agreement with FHWA, is required to provide the oversight on local projects. So what we have to do before we even start talking about, well, we're going to do things concurrently. So while Veronica and the project development group are talking to you about concept development and what steps you're going to be moving forward with, we're going to have local aid talk to you about your eligibility assessment. So an eligibility assessment is required for you to prove that your entity is capable of receiving and spending federal funds appropriately. So you'll have to do things like show us policies and procedures, what your organization looks like, and you'll have to identify a responsible charge, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. But you do have to go through all these steps and in order to receive the federal funds. So next slide. So the responsible charge, it's a designated person from your local entity. This person must be a full-time employee. We've tried to push back on FHWA on this and say, well, can it be a part-time employee? Can it be a consultant? And the answer is no. You can have a consultant who can assist a responsible charge, but the responsible charge is literally responsible for all the documentation and making sure all the federal processes are followed. The person does not have to be an engineer. Sometimes in some of the bigger cities, it seems better that the responsible charge maybe is actually a financial person, so they understand what the requirements are to aid the engineering office to make sure all of the requirements are aligned within the big city. So we have kind of seen that. And we do provide through the Rutgers Kate free training that you need to take for the responsible charge. So next slide. So there is a specific responsible charge training that you have to take. And I believe we are currently in the process of scheduling a number of those right now. And when they're scheduled, they will be on the Resource Center website. So you'll be able to access the times and for that. There's also additional trainings that you'll need to understand, design of ADA, grant management, those type of things. Again, these are all free trainings so that you can make sure that you understand the best way to meet all the federal requirements. Next slide. So Veronica, you want to talk about what happens next?
Yep. So next step will be Alyssa from my team will be contacting each of your organizations individually, and that will be to schedule a one-on-one meeting. That one-on-one meeting will be to talk specifically about your project readiness, and what needs to happen. So come prepared, as I said, to tell us everything you know. Ask all the questions that you need. If you know you've done something already, bring that. Tell us what it is, and we can assess where it fits into CD, what you need to do to make it, bring it up to the federal standards and stuff like that. As I said, we will probably at that time schedule a field trip so that we can save time in assessing what your project scope will be, if it's going to be a limited scope or a full scope. So you'll go out in the field with my team and we'll figure that out very quickly. The goal is to get these meetings done. I think there's like 17 projects. So we have to meet with each of you, right? So I would appreciate if as soon as Alyssa contact you, you get to schedule in and get on the books as fast as possible, and we can get this moving forward. We're excited to work with you. We're happy that these funds are in New Jersey, and we want to make sure that everybody gets to the end where the infrastructure is made better because you were able to use your funds. So while Alyssa is reaching out to you, get your team together. I would probably recommend that as many people from your organization as possible attend this first meeting, especially the financial folks, because everybody needs to understand what's at stake here. It's not just the responsibility of the engineer to get your design, right? There's a role for everybody in getting you to the finish line. So get everybody to the first meeting. They all don't have to attend all the follow-up meetings, but the first meeting is important for as many people in your organization as possible. Your responsible charge, most certainly, if you haven't identified one yet, you should start thinking about that now. All right, and that's all we got. Celia?
Sorry, my microphone was muted. So now if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you should all have access to your microphones and cameras now. So if you would like to raise your hand and ask your question via your microphone instead of the chat, whatever you prefer. But we have reached the question and answer portion, so feel free to ask away.
And so I just want to reiterate before we get any questions that it's critical that you get back to us ASAP. Time is already ticking away, and 3 years to get through the federal process is a crazy short time. But we have repeatedly found ways to make it work. So it just requires diligence on your side.
Hi, everybody. Real quick, the one thing that I guess the thing I'm least familiar with is the tip component of that, getting in the tip. I just wasn't clear when in this process. I'm assuming we're not in there just for the purpose of this conversation. So I just want to know when I should start being anxious about that. Do I need to get through this concept phase and with DOT first, and then I make a move, or I just wasn't clear on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, before you even get to concept development, you'll have to program those funds to use them, unless you're using other funds that aren't the congressionally directed spending grant and have discussed that with DOT ahead of time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're in the concept development phase, you do not need to be in the tip, but at the conclusion of the concept development phase, you definitely need to be in the tip.
Okay, well, Vanessa, just prepare. You'll get something from me soon.
Okay, great.
We'll
Looking forward to it.
All right, thanks.
Sounds great.
Good afternoon. So Sumac from Bayonne. We were happy about this, but we got a letter or an email from Senator Booker's office saying that they would be working with DOT. And since this money is for construction, I'm assuming that DOT will handle the tip, because we're in pre-PE, or how does that work?
So is this a continuation of another discretionary grant you have?
Yes.
Okay, so then are you sure you're not already in the tip?
Oh, no, we are in the tip.
Okay,
no.
then.
Yeah, no, we have several phases. I mean, so we have the federal base grant, and then we have some discretionary money from DOT, but we already have 4.5 million in the tip.
So just make sure your lead at DOT is aware, and also
Okay.
I suggest you reach out to Vanessa and just let her know which phase you're going to be
All right.
using the new grant for. Because it's already in the tip, but it now needs to be realigned to provide the correct information.
All right, thank you. I'll do that.
Sue, is this for the 440 Ped Bridge?
This is for the 440 pet bridge, yes. So we had 4.5, they added 2, and I just sent down, we also got $1 million discretionary from DOT. We just sent some paperwork in on that because we won't be able to make the award on the construction until we get through the PE. So, but I sent that already down to you, Veronica. I just sent
Okay.
that in this week. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just from a process perspective, maybe I should clarify. So when you get an eligibility assessment done, that's going to be through our local aid office. When you're working on the concept development phase, you're working with Veronica's project development group. Once you complete CD, or it's been determined that CD is done and you have your official letter that CD is done, then you're going to go back to working with the local aid team to actually get the project delivered.
Yeah, so I sent everything to Ebony Johnson, just as a fail safe. I thought I should start with her.
Absolutely.
We also have 3 questions in the chat. The first one is, can we get a copy of the slides for reference?
Yes, we can post it on the local aid website as well.
Okay, the next one is, I completed responsible charge training in 2023. Would that be valid for this process?
Of course not. So,
Unless you're 23, unless you're
No.
a county, right? No?
well, no, because what's happened is with the change of federal government changing some of the requirements, we were required to change our training. So
Okay.
we just got the new training approved, which is now why we're scheduling new sessions. So it'll be fun. You'll enjoy it.
Okay, and the last question in the chat is, the CD process federally, how does it work with construction of a new road and not improvements to an existing facility, such as preferred alternatives and such?
So I can tell you right now, you are not going to be doing any construction. If you're building a new road, clearly there's an immediate touch base with the MPOs that's needed. If you're adding additional capacity in a state with air quality restrictions, when you do a new road, you have to do an alternatives analysis that looks at everything environmental. It's complex, and yeah, you're going to be at the beginning of the process.
Yes, certainly a full scope, and those funds, well,
You're not
you're not going to get to construction in 3 years.
Nope. But if this is something that your entity wants to do, we could work with you and get you through the first part of the process. You can spend the funds that you have, but it's just not for what you thought it was going to be for. I see that it's, when did the new training begin for the person in charge? So we're literally in the process of scheduling now. I don't know if we put it up on the local aid or the resource center website yet, but it just got approved at the beginning of the month.
One additional question in the chat, just to confirm, do we apply for the tip after we receive the earmark, or do we need to complete the concept development phase first?
So you have to complete concept development regardless. That's the first thing that you have to do. When you're doing that, and immediately, it never hurts to reach out to your MPO and make sure that the communication is there. So I would encourage you to reach out to your MPOs at any time, but just remember, you're not actually receiving funding, right? So whatever you're doing has to be an agreement with DOT, and then you're getting reimbursed for anything that you're doing. So I would say yes for the training, because we were required to make changes by the federal government. You would be required to retake the training.
There is another question in the chat. Can you take money that was meant for construction and earmark and use it for concept development?
So let me just explain a little bit about how people are notified about these earmarks. they appear as line items in the federal budget. And it now these days is just saying the name of the project. So when earmarks are done, we have to adhere to the language in the federal budget. So if it just names a project, it says JFK Boulevard intersection improvement. As long as what you're doing is work on JFK intersection, it's eligible. So there is nothing in the title of the project that defines the phase of work, which is why we can use it for concept development, even though you were hoping it might be for construction. So
Right.
if you actually did a project and you're ready to go to construction and there's no way you can go backwards, as long as the name is generic enough, if it just says JFK intersection improvement, it could be JFK and First Street or JFK and 12th Street. So these are the things we try to work through with you to make sure you're able to spend the money if possible.
But most people, it seems, when they request the grant for construction, not knowing that you can't get to construction before doing other things. So that's where we do the course correction, and that's where sometimes it's a little confusing. So yes, you ask for construction money, but yeah, the feds said they gave you construction money, but they don't understand the process either, right? So you have to do CD. So you can either do CD with your own money, right? And then save the funds for design and construction, or save the money for construction, but you must do CD. Unless you can prove that you have done some task that we could say, okay, this qualifies. You might just need to make sure that you do your outreach and we can wrap this up and package it as CD, but we have to make that determination.
Will there be another meeting like this for funding recipients who couldn't make today's call?
So we can, for those who didn't, like I said, we're gonna have one-on-one with all of you to discuss these projects. So at that time, if there's anybody that didn't make this, then yeah, we'll go through some of these, some of this information before we get into your project specifics. And we'll post this information. Celia will post this information on the hub.
So just a reminder, we're here to help. Please reach out. Do not wait. Every day is a day that's ticking off the clock. And largely what happens is towns, or usually it's the towns, the counties usually know what they're doing. The towns go back and forth internally as to what they want to do, what they can do, and it wastes a lot of time. So the sooner you reach out, the better.
Previously, we have been asked for an award letter because we did not issue the grant. We don't have an official award letter per se. However, based on the information that we have, that we've received from FHWA, we can give you a letter saying that we acknowledge that there's this funds available to you. So anybody who needs one, when we do your one-on-one, you can let us know and we can provide you with something. You might need that for Vanessa, or you might need that for your council. Whatever it is, we can assist you with that.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and good luck.